Welcome back. Okay, this is module 5, and we'll be focusing on looking at our first Ansible playbooks here. And so if you've been following along, we should be able to just continue here. And we'll go ahead and make a directory structure in the first place. We use a -p flag to create the subdirectory as well. We'll go ahead and cd into the base directory. And our very first playbook, so we're going to go ahead and start looking at this, and then we will we'll actually run it. So the verify Apache playbook, we're going to start reproducing some of the things that we were doing in the ad hoc section here, and we'll be looking at the basic anatomy of a playbook. And so similarly to how we've been working with the host examples in our workshop environment, we have defined the host here as the web systems. We're using that become flag again, but now as a directive inside of the YAML-based playbook. And now looking at the tasks. So tasks should generally have names that are friendly to humans to read. We are using the yum module once again, that HTTPD package. And we're choosing state of latest for that. And we'll also set up Apache to make sure that it's actually running. And so we'll use the service module and put it into a started state as well. So coming back to the playbook steps here, what we should be able to do is go ahead and take a copy of this. So I'll copy it actually from my repo, my local clone of this GitHub repo, but you can follow along by copying it elsewhere. Go into insert mode, go ahead and paste that in. Our next step will be to go ahead and run the Ansible playbook. So once again, with the inventory flag, we're now up a level. So we're actually calling out to that below it and running the Apache playbook. And so it does gather facts as we've discussed previously. It does go ahead and make changes to install Apache. And it does make sure that Apache is running at the end. And we're looking at our output really for the first time. There are 3 tasks. All of them ended up okay. 2 of them actually made changes. Those were the installation of the Apache package and starting of the service. So what we should be able to do to actually verify that did its job, again, we're in a trust but verify kind of business here, is we should be able to SSH and curl out to the local host. So we'll SSH to any one of these. And we are actually seeing basically, just command line based HTML output here and seeing what the default Apache homepage or index page looks like. So in the next case, we do this a little bit differently in the live workshop. We ask the folks who join us to actually, try to critically think their way through it. But basically, being able to invert changes or undo changes that we make is a very important skill that we should develop as much as and as quickly as we can. Anything that we do in an automated fashion, we should be able to undo pretty trivially. So in some cases, that is really just as simple as changing the flag that we're sending or the option that we're sending into a command line argument. So here we'll go ahead and actually create a file on our system, and whether we actually execute this or not, the following commands will actually work, should work fine. But in this case, basically what we're doing is to set this up. Once again, the hosts are the web systems. We're using become. We're going into the tasks. We're running the service module, and we're choosing, first of all, to stop the service, and then the inverse then being to actually make sure that Apache is no longer installed. So we use HTTPD as the service name, and we put it into an absent state. And so we could run that if we wanted to, and we would actually find that it would remove the service entirely. So coming back to the main steps here, the next thing that we want to go ahead and do is configure Apache. It's great that we can run it with the default index page, but we'd like to make some other changes to it and see what we can do there. So we'll go ahead and cd into templates. And because we didn't want to turn this into a very heavy Jinja 2 type workshop that's just that's a bit much for a 101. We've gone ahead and just created the Jinja 2 template. So we'll get into what makes Jinja 2 templating so powerful here in a bit, but suffice it to say that this actually gives us a new version of our index file that we can then work with. So we'll cd back a level, and we'll go into creating another playbook here. And in this case, we should be able to, I can do it from either page. We'll go ahead and take a look here. We'll go ahead and copy this out. Sometimes I'm going to use my cache repo. Sometimes I'm going to use the GitHub repo webpage. Either way, we're good. Don't mind me. So here we are going ahead and creating that file. Let's step through this file a little bit, see what we're actually doing. So we're optimizing on what we initially did, the installation. So in this case, using Jinja 2 templates allows us to put variables into files when and where we would like to have them. And so that's one of the significant changes to this playbook, is that we are actually introducing a variable called myHostName. We should be getting pretty familiar at this point with the tasks that we see here, but we are introducing this when we're writing this index.html file. So we're taking out the template module as opposed to the copy module, which would just take basically a file as is. We're using the templating module to actually create a new file from a template that includes this variable and actually composes the overall file, the index.html page, with that variable included. And once again, as we have done previously, we are actually ensuring that Apache is running. And we'll actually also use the debug module here, or debug task, to basically allow us to see the variable and verify that it is doing what we expect it to do. So let's see how that works. So we'll go and we'll run this command now. And once again, it should be getting pretty routine to see the way that these commands are lined up. This is the Ansible Playbook command. We're pointing at the inventory file, and we're running that playbook. So it's making sure that it is making the changes that we need to make. So it was actually already running Apache. We didn't actually move it from the last run. And so, it's installed, it's running. We've updated the index file here, and we've actually outputted the host names in question. So what we should be able to do is run a command that we ran pretty recently, and actually we'll SSH out to that system. And we should see now that indeed this IP address is now included as a part of our simple index.html page, right? So it is actually making the changes that we wanted it to. One brief thing that we want to introduce here, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in a future video, is just to look at Ansible Lint, which is a helper program that allows us to take basically the best ideas and what's generally considered to be, customary best practice these days on working with Ansible playbooks that the community thinks about, and allow us to lint there. And we'll actually show some custom rule sets as well. And so we've intentionally put some things in that Ansible Lint would talk to us about. And so, for instance, this may be a little hard to see until I highlight it, but it does recommend that package installs not use latest. That's considered to be just a best practice. And then it also recommends generally that you do set file permissions when you are working with files, whether templates or otherwise. And it also provides some output here if we did want to silence these or otherwise deal with them. But linting is what I would consider to be a general best practice as far as software development as well. And so as we're bringing our infrastructure teams up to a little bit more of a software development standard, working with our software engineering peers, they'll often find it helpful that we're starting to adopt some of the same general practices on good code hygiene and so forth. So we also want to talk a little bit here about variables and loops and handlers a little bit. So we'll introduce some new ideas into the equation next year. So we're going to go ahead and make a new directory structure to give us a chance to work a little bit differently with some of this. We're going to cd into the base of that structure. And next, we're going to create another file. And so we'll walk through this file here momentarily. So we're adding a little bit more to the puzzle here. We're actually starting to work with the configuration file itself. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this in so that it's already loaded and we can get rolling after we step through the code. But basically from here, once again, we're still targeting the same hosts that we have been. We're starting to introduce just a little bit more here. So this is a concept around working with loops. So we can actually define a list of packages that we want to install as a part of the installation that we're doing. And we can also variabilize things like test messages or other text that we would put in, as well as parameterizing or variabilizing the settings that we want to have with a few important things like the Apache Web Server port and so forth. So as far as tasks go, we can use the concept of with items to actually call out to these packages here and see that we can also choose to use notify. So this will introduce something we'll talk a little bit more about soon around handlers. But I guess we can talk about it now as a matter of fact. So, basically handlers are mostly used in the real world for doing things like service restarts, where there may be several tasks that would run within a playbook, depending on the current state of the system, that might require services to be restarted, but we don't necessarily want to restart the service more than once. So we can use notify to actually defer that and then make a single restart. So it's significantly more efficient than continually restarting the service on each task that might need it. Systems will run faster that way. We're also creating a site enabled directory here. We are copying a templated httpd.conf file. We're copying another version of the index HTML and making sure that Apache's in a started state, but also in a restarted state based on some of the other changes that we're making here. So we should also grab the templates before we move forward on that. So once again, we've gone ahead and created these templates just for ease of working in this workshop. Couple level. We'll go ahead and Ansible Lint that just to kind of build the muscle memory that we want to use that. And once again, we do get certain things that we'd probably want to clean up in the real world. But in any event, let's move forward. Nothing fatal there in Ansible Lint's opinion. And so once again, we're making changes. We're doing things. And at the end of this, what we should see now is we do that same SSH command. Gosh, that's far back. We've now changed the message. So as you may recall, we had actually included this as a new test message for the latest playbook that we're running. And indeed, we do find on the live system when we curl that, that we are seeing that there. So that's pretty helpful. So that concludes our playbook coverage, just basic playbooks. And in the next video, we'll be covering roles.